Hello everyone, Gammon here. So, the first thing I should mention is that this will be a story analysis of Sekiro. I'll be talking about two major themes, but I'll also be talking about bosses, mini-bosses, late game stages, elements of the story, and just about everything else. So unless you finish the game, you probably shouldn't be watching this. Be sure to come back and check it out later. Either way, this has been your spoiler warning. You've been warned. And with that out of the way, let's talk about Sekiro. I actually find it kind of difficult to think about the story of Sekiro without thinking about previous Dark Souls games. There are obvious differences, like the move to an Eastern setting, or that the protagonist Wolf is a named and well-defined character and not a blank slate. But there are also obvious similarities, and one of them is the first theme we'll be talking about, which is how immortality is a curse. In Sekiro, immortality is depicted as inherently destructive and seductive. One of the ways the game presents this to you is your main antagonist, Genichiro. Genichiro seeks to save Ashina, and in doing so he's willing to lose everything about Ashina that made it worth saving. The moral degeneration Genichiro undergoes in his quest to seek immortality for his country is reflected in many ways, and one of them is the Blazing Bull. Through the conversations you hear when you eavesdrop on some soldiers, as well as the bull's description in a prayer necklace, it's clear that using the bull in combat is seen as a shameful and desperate act. One of the more subtle ways this is shown in-game is the lines Genichiro delivers after killing you. When you die to Genichiro in one of his first phases on top of Ashina Castle, he says, "For the glory of Ashina." But in the third stage, when he sheds his armor and reveals his true self, he becomes more honest and says, "For the preservation of Ashina." Genichiro is way too far gone to think about things like honor or even the wishes of his grandfather. All he cares about is the preservation of his country, and he's willing to pay any cost, and that includes kidnapping and murdering a child, defying his grandfather, using underhanded tactics, and even using a sword that will eventually kill him. For the preservation of Ashina, he's willing to pay any cost, even if it means destroying Ashina's soul. And since I mentioned Genichiro's armor falling off, I wanna have a quick side note. The devastation the search of immortality brings to someone being hidden below the surface, in Genichiro's example his armor, is an often recurring theme in Sekiro, and it's often hidden by water, which is the cause of immortality in Sekiro. In Fountainhead Palace, while some of the damage water has caused is visible, such as lichen and collapsed walls, most of the ruin is hidden. Directly below the surface of the lake, you'll see corpses of ancient men and fish slowly rotting, and buildings that once stood tall sink to the depth. And as you swim through the submerged passage, you'll reach a room where the nobles are feasting. In Mibu village, if you dive beneath the river that provides them their drinking water, you can see the corpses that are embedded in the sediment, and are probably the cause of the madness is in the village. This is even shown in the Mist Noble boss fight. Mist is a form of water after all, and while the noble is alive, the pagoda seems intact. After his defeat and the dissipation of the mist, you'll see that rot has long ago eaten away at the walls of the pagoda. But let's get back to the characters of Sekiro. Genichiro isn't the only person destroyed by the allure of immortality. The ruin immortality brings is exemplified in the game's final area, Fountainhead Palace. But even in Fountainhead Palace, where the evidence of corruption is, well, everywhere, it's exemplified best by one man, tending to his master. We don't know much about this man, but we do know he was told he'd become a noble, and seeking immortality for himself, he drank the waters of the palace, and now he tends to a large koi fish he calls Master. His daughter thinks that something must have gone wrong. How could anyone choose to care for a fish for all of eternity? And it does seem the water in some way has twisted his mind, but isn't everyone in the palace equally mad? Looking at him made me realize, is he any different from any of the other people you've gone past? He tends to his fish forever. The warrior women play with their ball forever, or practice sword fighting. Nobles usually play a flute. But all of them are stuck in time. As everything around them rots away, They are doing a single task again and again without change until the end of time, or at least until the rot inside of them grows too great and they ascend to become whatever it is those dragon things are. It's very clear that those things, at least in my mind, used to be nobles, and that coughing thing they do is just them trying to expel the rot that is forever inside of them now. Either way, when you're stuck in time, eternally doing the same thing over and over again, I don't think it really matters if you're in a beautiful palace playing a flute or feeding a fish. It's kinda all the same cursed existence. And this is very much in line with one of the four truths of Buddhism, that clinging to impertinent things brings sorrow. So, of course, when you go to a temple that has been seduced by immortality, you'd be told that they strayed away from the path of Buddha. But it's not the monks I'd like to talk about, but a knight, using a very familiar moveset, seeking immortality. Unlike Genichiro, who wishes to preserve his country, or the palace denizens who are seeking immortality for themselves, Armor Knight Gale has a very different desire. He wants immortality for his son. This isn't just shown by him asking you to put your sword away for the sake of his son, but also in the description of the firecrackers they sold on their way to Japan. This time the goal is to gain immortality for his son, but again it will end in tragedy. But perhaps not as great a tragedy as it could have been, had he actually achieved his goals. So it's not hard to see why, while playing this game, I kept comparing it to Dark Souls. Immortality as a curse is a theme that both of them have at the very heart of their story. However, even in this shared theme, there are obvious and major differences. For instance, in Dark Souls, immortality is viewed as a curse from the beginning of the game, the curse of the dark side, while in Sekiro it is worshipped and sought after. Ashina actively worships water, they actively worship divine beings. These divine beings are the palace nobles, the same people who we know are basically cursed to a horrible existence. So not only is the nature of immortality different, with one being represented by water and the other by fire, also the attitude of the world towards immortality is different. So while it is similar, I just wanted to mention a few of the differences. But I think I talked enough about immortality. Let's talk about the second major theme of Sekiro, and this one is new, at least when you compare it to Dark Souls. We actually just mentioned it when we talked about the Armored Knight. The theme of family. The way Wolf is introduced to us, and by that I mean the first time we see him, not the first time we get to play him, is with two scenes. The first is the moment he met Owl, his father. The second is Wolf being introduced to Koro, the child he's sworn to protect. We are shown these scenes because they are the defining moments in Wolf's life, and in the future, the choice between the man that raised him and the child who loves him is a choice that will impact the game the most. And these feelings, these bonds, aren't one-sided. In his search to gain immortality and glory for himself, Owl does betray Wolf. He actually kills him. But in his final moments, he can't help but feel pride for his son. Koro clearly cares deeply for Wolf, and knowing the fate Wolf will face, to feel no pain, fight forever, eventually lose his humanity, all of this weighs heavily on him. Koro's desire to sever immortality is probably at least partly driven by his desire to save Wolf from a curse he unwittingly put on him, and he's willing to throw his own life away if it means saving Wolf from the curse he accidentally put on him. And these types of bonds, usually familial bonds, are what drive Sekiro's story, and not just for our main characters. They exist in almost every character you'll meet in Sekiro, or at least every character with a name and dialogue, from major to minor, both friend and foe. Let's start with Emma. Emma is in some ways a mirror image to Wolf. Getting the sculpture drunk will reveal that he actually discovered her on a battlefield, in the same way Owl found you. He took pity on her and fed her rice, which is the same bonding moment Wolf and Owl had, and she started following him. But unlike Owl, the sculpture decided to give her up to Dogen so that he'll raise her up as a doctor instead of a shinobi. And Emma never forgot his kindness. You can find that out by getting her drunk, and when you ask her why she learned about sword fighting, she eventually admits it's because she wanted to be able to kill a demon, if one ever were to appear. While this doesn't make sense at the time, at the end of the game, when you see the ultimate fate of the sculpture, to become a demon of hatred, it becomes clear that the reason Emma learned to fight was that if the man who saved her ever lost himself to hatred, she'd be able to save him. She really is the gentle blade. And we've already talked about Armored Knight Gale and his quest to save his son, but in the same temple there's a large monk sitting under a tree, crying. He doesn't know why he's sad, he just knows that everyone is gone, and that he has been left behind. It is only when you show him a pure white pinwheel that he remembers. He was a monk in charge of caring for the children of endless rejuvenation, and when most of them died and the sole survivor was locked away in the inner sanctum, he was left alone. While his quest diverges, it is possible for him to be reunited with the children he lost in the Halls of Illusions, a world on the border between life and death. Gyobo Masataka Oniwa, the demon, used to be a bandit, only to be taken in by Genichiro and adopted into the clan. And it's this act of inviting Gyobo into his extended family, that won him his loyalty. A loyalty so fierce, his last words were to ask forgiveness from the man who rescued him from a life of banditry. And it was the loss of such a bond that drove a beast into protecting a flower, in the hope that one day he'll be able to form a family again. I could go on, but this video is getting a bit long in the tooth, so let's bring it back to the main antagonist of the game, Genichiro. He is the adopted grandson of Isshin, and when you defeat him for the last time, this is what he has to say.
俺は結局何もできなかった。だが誘引が
To me, this reveals a deep inferiority complex. Isshin, despite being an ill old man, has managed to keep Ashina independent for 20 years, while Genichiro is struggling to keep it independent before Isshin has even passed. The gratitude that he has for Isshin, coupled with his inability to measure up to him and repay his kindness, is probably what drives his need to preserve Ashina, and that leads to his fall from grace. All of this makes Sekiro's story very different from the Souls series. While families obviously existed in previous Souls games, it has rarely been a driving force, and most of the families were of gods and never displayed the humanity shown in Sekiro, more pantheons than actual families. This humanity that drives the story and every character within the story, the desperate search for a cure for your son, attempting to cope with the loss of the children you raised or the loss of your wife, being forced to face the man that raised you to save the boy who you swore to protect, working hard to repay the debt you have to the man that saved you, or failing to do so and being haunted by that fact. These bonds are what drive Sekiro's story forward. They're at the heart. They are the heart. I think it creates a rather beautiful, if bittersweet, story.
お疲れ様でした、父様。永遠などなくとも、私も姉様もずっと一緒ですよ。だから休みましょう、父様。
Anyway, that should be enough for now. Thanks for watching.